You might wonder, what do I do when my trees start to go dormant? How do I prepare them for winter, and how do I make sure that next year they wake up healthy, ready to get going? Don't you just love these days? It is early November, skies are blue, there's no wind, temperatures are still warm enough that with a little pullover you can just sit outside, and this is an optimal time to work on your bonsai and prepare them for winter. One of the first things that you should know is, how do I recognize that the tree is going to go dormant? Well, it is very easy. The leaves, they start turning color. As soon as a large part of the canopy is starting to change color, that means the whole tree has decided, I'm going to go dormant. That is the time that you can start looking at your tree, preparing it for winter. Now you have a window of about 4 to 6 weeks between the tree starting to drop and the tree being fully dormant. Depends of course a little bit on the weather. It also depends a little bit on your climate, but this is just a rule of thumb. I am now removing all the leaves, and the reason is not one of health. It is more just for the ease for me. Because what I'm going to do with this tree, I'm going to first prune it back. Then I'm going to look at a winter spray. In early fall, I prefer to use an oil or a soap-based spray. What that does, it will suffocate all the eggs of insects living on the tree. That means that in early spring, there's less of a risk of all sorts of parasites and insects waking up on my tree. Next to this, I'm going to wire out the whole tree. Going to prune it back and basically clean up the whole pot from all the pests and diseases. Then it's going to go into a shelter spot in my garden, so that in springtime I can spray the whole tree with an anti-fungicide. Now today is a perfect day for doing this work because the soap will stay on. Normally it is rainy in November, now we have a few dry days, so I'm going to do it now. Pruning back means, let's have a look here at this crown tip. So if we look at this crown tip here, you see this part has gone all black. And the black part needs to come off. This is an area where fungal infections very easily take a hold, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to cut it back, not just in the black, but I'm going to skip one and I'm going to go to the next node so that I get a healthy drying out here of this cut area. And actually, this is a little sacrifice branch, but I don't need 2 sacrifice branches. And these come out in parallel, so I'm just going to remove one of the 2. Yeah, just like that. And let's remove this last leaf as well. This Arakawa is one where I grafted a branch into a root. Let me turn this tree around. So this here has been grafted onto the root. And I think that this graft has taken. So I have scarred already the entrance side. The exit is a lot thicker than the entrance side. I'm going to now remove the branch. This should now have merged enough. Now let me flip this tree around, and the donor comes all the way here in the back, and I can just remove the donor branch at the base, just like that. Don't need this anymore. So let me just continue here removing all these leaves, so we have a better look at the structure of the tree. In fact, I'm now cutting them off, but I think they're loose enough. Let's see. Yes, gently pulling, I also get the leaves off. And I think I'm not pulling any buds off. Be gentle, and then you can quite easily strip a lot of these leaves. Next to this, as you are removing the leaves and pruning back, one of the things you might notice, like here, there's a little wire still in the tree. So I unwire all my trees completely, even if I want to rewire them, because this way all the wire will be on for the same amount of time. Now if you don't have the time to rewire your trees right now, that is okay. But just keep in mind that if you try to rewire later in the season, say around Christmas, it might be a lot more brittle than when you wire now. And even in early spring, it might be brittle as well. Now when it comes to pruning my trees in fall, I'm always a little bit careful. So I try to not make any big cuts anymore, because right now sap is being pulled out of the tree, and I'm concerned that if the tree doesn't quickly enough respond to my pruning actions, that it will actually have an open wound, and worse, that you get a lot of dieback because the tree doesn't create a new sap flow stream. So I don't do any big cuts, I only do the small cuts. By defoliating, of course, it becomes very, very clear where there is the coarse growth and where is the refined growth. And I try to remove all the coarse growth, of course. refined branches, so that's branches with short internodes or very thin branches. That is of course what builds the canopy of the tree. The coarser, longer branches, such as this, are nice if you want to close wounds, like here, but also the one that I had here, and build the thickness of the trunk. But the further you are in refinement, the less you want these thick branches. And in fact, there should not be any thick branches anymore in a tree that really has entered the final refinement stage, because there you just remove all the coarse growth already in the early growing season and avoid it from actually becoming coarse growth. Don't know where does this come from. This is all from this grafted, so I'm not going to pull those off. I'm just going to leave these in place a little bit longer to aid in stabilizing the connection. I think this here is a very nice example. If you look at this branch and you look at the length of this internode, that's very, very long. This is a branch that has grown very strongly over the year and therefore has created very long internodes. Similarly to this is also long, but it's already half the length. If I compare that to this branch, you see this is a lot more gentle to growth. This is much more useful for building the upper canopy than branches like this. This, however, has aided in strengthening this branch, and I've allowed it to grow because there's a tension wire actually holding this branch down, and I want this to settle in place. But it is not going to be very useful in the final tree, so I'm going to remove this here. If you look carefully, there's a little line here in the bark, and this little line here is actually a node. So I can clip just beyond the node, leaving maybe half an inch, a centimeter or so. This might activate a bud here, and otherwise I still have a bud here. Now I said this was better, so I'm going to leave that in place, removing just the dead part. And here the same, this is quite long, I don't want it that long, remove it. So this is now pruned back. The area up here, this I'm just going to all leave in place, to be honest. This is nice and refined, and later on when I'm wiring I might decide to keep or remove parts of it. And in this fashion I will have to go through the whole tree and just remove everything that is coarse and long in places where I don't want it to be coarse and long. During the wiring I can still decide that certain things need to be pruned a little bit more. This I'm going to leave in place because this is really to close this wound here. There's a big cut here. Let me flip the tree around, because in an earlier video I showed you how I made the cut here, and this is now completely healed over. You actually cannot see this anymore except for a little bit of change in texture, but besides that it's doing really, really well. But this is ugly. This is ugly. This is ugly. So that's my first stage of pruning, right? Removing everything that really is not pretty and is sitting in a place where if you leave it, it will be ugly for a very long time. And I can't remove everything because I'll lose the ramification, but at least I can remove some of them, then wire some others out, and in 2 or 3 years remove the rest. If we now look here at the pot, there's a lot of small weeds. Ideally, all of those are removed as well from the pot. This will just prevent them from growing over winter, and in spring it won't fill the pot all as much. And if you have a mild winter, these might actually start flowering, propagating, throwing more seeds around. Once you've done all that, of course, it's then a matter of going through and say, well, there's all this moss on the substrate. And moss on the substrate is not per se a good thing to have. I know that people like moss on their substrate, but the reason why it is not a good thing to have is it basically crawls up on the bark. And especially with species like this, where you really like the coarse bark, if you have a lot of moss on it, it retains moisture. Moisture, of course, means that this can start rotting, and slowly but surely you'll lose the bark on the lower trunk. And you get this really, really odd situation where you have very nice old mature bark high up on the trunk, but the first inch or two, the first 2 to 5 centimeters, are covered in moss. Bark rots away and it gets really, really thin, and you get the young uncrackled bark on there. So it is key to at least once a year remove all the moss. Now I like to do this in fall. Well, actually I don't like to do it, but I do it in fall. And after that I use an anti-algae spray or paint, and I basically get something from the hardware store. Just very, very regular stuff that you use for pavers. Just check the label, and if it says it is suitable to use also in areas where there's other plants growing, it's typically okay. Most of these things now have a recipe that really is dedicated to algae and moss and not on something else. But first, remove it manually as much as possible, like I'm doing here. And here you can actually see what is happening. See here that with the moss, little pieces of bark start to come off. That means that the bark has lost so much of its integrity here already that the moss is just able to lift the little plates of bark off. That's really a shame. So I need to be very gentle when cleaning out. And here I am more gentle. And that will give the bark the space also to dry out again. And once I've done this gentle clean of the bark, you see here another piece where the bark has gone missing. That is when I'll apply the anti-algae liquid. And literally, this is the product that I'm using, right? So this really is just a normal algae and green coating remover available in any regular hardware store. There's still a few drips in there, but it's almost done. And actually what I do is I make the dilution that is needed, put it in the bottle, and then I can just use it straight from the bottle. Let's see, a few drops left. And basically once I am done cleaning off the moss and all the weeding done, I can just take the anti-algae and gently paint the bark. You see some loose parts of the bark already, not really great. And I really try to get in there, making sure that there's no moss left over here at the base that can crawl back up. As said, this is now just for demonstration. I need to go and sit down and do this for the whole tree, particularly with Arakawa or other coarse barked species. It is important to really take care to remove moss at an early stage. And as said, I like to do this in fall. Now with the moss removal, the light pruning, defoliation, all done. For me it is time to look at this. This is a soapy oil mixture that you add to water. Then you just add it to a spray can, right? Just like this. And fill it up with water. Use the description that is on the package. And this is not a product specifically for bonsai. You can get this in any garden center and you look at winter treatment for fruit trees and it's either against fungal infections or it is against insects. I use the one against insects in winter, and I think if you use neem oil, N-E-E-M oil, that actually works against both. Now I prefer to use the anti-insect in fall, and then in spring I'll do a fungal infection. And basically you know how it works, right? You just fill the spray can and soak the whole tree. Let's not do it on the table because then everything gets soaking wet. But oh, I need a new spray can, that's clear. But effectively just make sure that you hit the bark on all sides, all the branches, all the buds, and just drain. Right. Now nothing that is lifting on this tree for winter is going to survive the next 48 hours, and then the tree will be clean of pests. And now it is also time to look at how am I going to style this for the next season. This here of course is the grafted branch. I'm not going to touch it. Well, touching it, I'm not going to wire it out, but the rest of the branches I can now of course give a light wiring. And then it just sits there. Only when it gets really cold do I move these into a corner. And what is really cold? Well, just a night frost is not really cold. But if we get sustained -5 Celsius, so we are talking, let me calculate that, that's about 23 Fahrenheit or colder, for more than a night or 2 nights in a row, then these pots will all go down onto the ground. If it starts freezing, I am going to protect them from sun and wind. So if it is sustained freezing, I am taking the pots and the trees out of sun and wind so that they don't dry out. Because effectively what happens is, if the roots are frozen, the tree can't take up water, and then these branches will desiccate very quickly. I'm doing this sort of wiring work with the trust that the next 2-3 weeks I'm not going to get any deep frosts. So by that time these branches should have slowly repaired. I told you already it is nice and warm still, or again last week it was terribly cold, so this should all be alright. And basically in this fashion you can wire out the whole tree, just doing the minor branches, positioning them lightly, pruning back the tips, removing little dead ends from earlier pruning this year, and the tree is ready to go for winter. Now what are the next steps that I do in winter? Basically this will go back onto this bench. I will clean out the bench, I will remove all the leaves and everything that's fallen off so that the whole surface area is nice and clean as well. And then they just stand outside in the rain. Once temperatures drop and we get sustained frost, then I make sure that the trees don't stand in the wind or in the sun. And once the frost drops below -5 Celsius, so let's say that's about 23 Fahrenheit, for longer periods of time, then I put all my trees on the ground so that they're insulated on the roots. The earth will work as a little bit of a heater and that will keep the roots warmer. Besides that, not much to be said. If you want to know more about pruning before winter, take a look over there. Particularly when you like junipers, or if you are concerned with how do I protect my tree against frost, have a look right there. And with that, keep growing bonsai. See you next time. And if you have something that can stop these airplanes from flying, let me know. This was Jelle growing bonsai.